Hi, and welcome back to the Grief Inspired YouTube channel. My name is Catherine McNulty, and I'm very excited to have Kari the Mortician with us today. And I'm likely thinking that you guys know about her YouTube channel because she is a sensation on the YouTube. But if you don't, that's something we're going to be talking about today, and I want you to go and check out her YouTube channel. Kari, hi, and welcome to the Grief
Hi,
Inspired YouTube channel.
a sensation. That's a lot. That's, I don't know about that, but
I was really excited, a little bit, honestly, a little bit timid to watch some things because I'm like, do I want to know this information? Do I not want to know this information? So I did find it like very engaging. So let's start by how did you get here? How did you and
yeah.
how and why did you choose what you do?
So I was 16 and needed a job. So my mom was an aftercare coordinator at a funeral home. She led all the support groups and worked with families after all the funerals and for the next year after at least. It's like they need to have someone at the funeral home. This was the pager era, so funeral directors needed to go be able to leave the funeral home and not have to answer the phones. And so that's how I started typing on a typewriter and working visitations and setting up and tearing down chairs and vacuuming, vacuuming, vacuuming. Never really had interest in being a funeral director per se. I liked working at the funeral home. It was comfortable and I enjoyed learning about things slowly and along the way. I didn't realize how much I was interested until going off to college and then tried my apprenticeship and just fell in love with it. And so, yeah, I've been in the business 30 years at this point and 20, almost 23 licensed.
Is that as the funeral director, you're kind of doing all aspects of the business. I remember I was watching one of your videos and you were talking about the PPE that you wear and how,
Yeah.
you'll be in like really nice clothing, but you have to put on the PPE because you're doing things that are somewhat messy.
Yeah.
So is that true that you sort of do everything as the funeral director, or at least have your hand in everything? I don't know if that's the right way to say
Not
it.
not always. It depends
Okay.
on the funeral home and the way that the business model is. If you're a larger funeral home, you're typically compartmentalized because you cannot go between all the areas. You are going to have people who make arrangements, people who work in the care center, people who go out on funerals. So it's broken down more. You are a funeral director who likes just certain areas, then you go to a larger funeral home. A smaller funeral home, you're going to do all of it by necessity. So you're going to go on the removal, you're going to do the embalming, you're going to meet the family, you're going to run the funeral, you're going to do, the typewriter even still if you need to. And so it just really depends on the funeral home setup and how it is divided out work wise. So there may be weeks all I do is meet families, and sometimes I'll do some, embalmings, or sometimes I'll get bodies dressed, or, it just depends.
Well, yeah, and that's so interesting too. Do you have a part of it that is your favorite, so to speak? And if you're working more with
Yeah.
families, does it like do you sort of miss the working with the bodies and things?
I think depending on the day, there's days you don't want to talk to anybody because you're having a bad day. So it's nice to just go in the care center and just do work and not have to like give all your energy to a family because it
Mhm.
takes a lot of energy to show up for them. It takes a lot of just mental and work to be that person. And like the other day, I met three families. It was a very long day. I was exhausted. I got home. I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want anybody to touch me. I don't want anybody near me. Like I'm peopled out. We should always want to be showing up and we should, but it's like we also are people outside of the funeral home and have a lot of energy that we need to give to our families and for ourselves and take time away from the funeral home. So it's hard to say, gosh, I'm over helping people and not wanting to do it anymore right this minute. And so it feels selfish saying that, but we do get to those days. My dog is like going to tear a door down to try and get to me right now. Eddie is a beast. If you guys watch my channel, we talk about Eddie. He's a 14-month-old Bernedoodle. He's like 100 pounds and he's the neediest thing I have ever experienced in my life. Like cling on, full body needs love all the time.
Well, like as you're talking here, this just gives me like such an appreciation. I mean, especially, because I work with clients obviously who are grieving, and I
Yeah.
understand the emotional energy that that takes. It's interesting because you think of, other professions that are sort of closely related. You think of like a coroner. Like I haven't
Yep.
ever talked to a coroner. I don't know who, and they kind of like stay behind the scenes, behind closed doors a lot of times. But here for what you do, you have to be able to do both. And not only do you need to do both, but you need to be able to switch relatively quickly.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, because like if you go in, when you go to like the small funeral homes, it's kind of quintessential that you got the guy in the tie and he's working the front and but he needs to embalm, so he'll run in the back, throw his tie over his shoulder, do a little bit of an embalming, cover the person back up, go back out and do what he got to do, run back in, throw the tie back over his shoulder or tuck it into your suit shirt and then do something and then go back out. Like because you have to run between all your roles, you're mowing the grass, you're shoveling, you're snow blowing, you're parking, you're kind of doing all of it, especially in a smaller funeral home. Yeah.
what advice do you give to people, maybe on like, I'd love to hear about like how do you choose a place, right? Because people are different, places are different. So how would you choose that? And then what are the couple of things that they should really be aware of to,
Well, we all choose things for different reasons. So where this can go wrong is you taking the recommendation of a hospice nurse, which is illegal. They should not be doing that, but it happens a lot that, your hospice nurse says, "Hey, if you want cremation, call this place." Well, cremation doesn't just mean they want a cheap, low budget cremation. It could mean that they want a full service followed by cremation. So it's knowing the questions to ask that maybe someone that's in connection with the family ahead of time, a death doula, a hospice nurse, someone at the hospital, someone at the nursing home, whoever it may not be choosing for the reasons the family want them chosen. So it's good for the family to actually be making the choice after they have talked to a funeral home. You get a good gut feeling. Follow your gut. I always say follow
love
your gut.
that?
If you walk into a funeral home, like you're going to visit one or two, and you don't feel any warm and fuzzy, if you walk in and no one greets you for like forever, if you walk in and it's cold and dark and you're just not vibing with it, you just leave. It's fine. That's not your place. Even if your loved one's been taken into the care of the funeral home, you're sitting down to make arrangements, you can still change. If you're getting a bad vibe at that moment, say, I think I need to make some calls and just switch funeral homes and transfer your loved one. You're going to pay that funeral home for the transfer into their care, but you can always change. So if you get a bad vibe along the way, you can always change.
That's good
Legally,
advice.
when you walk into a funeral home and you ask about pricing, they have to give you a general price list. It is a law. It is a federal law. It's not just a state law. So they have to give you a general price list that has all these things laid out for you. It cannot just be package pricing. It has to be legit itemized out so you can compare apples to apples between funeral homes. This is putting the consumer in control of being able to look at information between funeral homes and see what's on the up and up. If a funeral home asks you to give them your name and phone number before they will give you that information, that is illegal. So that should be a red flag to you. So there's different things that are more so like red flags that might be happening. Now, if you call on the phone for a price, they don't have to provide you or mail you a general price list. They can quote you some numbers over the phone, but I would ask them to mail you one or email you one. A lot of funeral homes have them right on their website that you can get a general price list, especially if you're looking for someplace for a low budget cremation. Remember, it's low budget for a reason.
Mm.
And you need to compare apples to apples. What'll happen with some of these places is you go for a $1,000 cremation and your bill ends up over 3,000 because every single little bitty thing adds in there. Well, we do want to see mom one more time. Okay, that's this much money. It's this much money. It's this much money. It's this much money. And so it's okay, we get you in the door for the low price, but by the time you leave, you're higher than someone else because it was not apple to apples comparison. So those are the things I would say is follow your gut, have a conversation with some of the staff. Doesn't even need to be the funeral director because all of the other accessories, auxiliary staff, whatever that word is, other people that work at the funeral home are just as important in the process, and you're probably going to encounter them just as much as anybody else. So have a good vibe and feeling about them and feel that you can entrust your loved one with them. It's not a disposal thing you're doing. You're trying to find someone to take care of, these important people in your lives. And that's one thing I've never understood. Hey, I'm going to find the cheapest place to like take my mom. Well, isn't your mom like the super important person? Like vibe it, feel it out, go to different places and see where you're most comfortable and you trust rather than just call. But a lot of people do choose based on my family's always used this funeral home, generationally, or I like that it's owned by a family, or I like that it is, owned by a corporation, or I like that it's this, or people have different reasons for why they choose different places. But if you have a bad feeling at some point, or you think something is wrong, you can always transfer, but always ask good questions. Because I get people that email me and say, oh my gosh, this happened. I can't believe it. And I'm like, that's normal.
That's what's going to be my next question. So what I hear you saying is like think about the type of environment and the vibe, trust your gut. Think about, where you potentially, what your tolerance is for a
Yep.
price point. And then sort of what level of service that you should expect. Is there anything else in there that I missed?
Consistency, if every time you call you're talking to someone different, are
Mhm.
you going to like that? Because there are people who want you to hold their hand
Yeah.
the whole time. But if you're at a large funeral home, you may get a different person every single time you call and go in there because
Okay.
of the quantity. So that is something also to think about is how much do I need from this place?
Right.
How much do I need them to respond to questions, to walk me through things? Because a low budget place or something may not sit with you to call Social Security. They may not help you with life insurance. They may not sit with you those extra hours because it's not part of their full service that they
Right.
give. So kind of think about how much you're going to need from a funeral home and from professionals, and that may guide you as well.
So you kind of brought up some of the things that can go wrong,
Yeah.
right? Like so I don't know what those are. Give me a sense of, things that I'm sure 22 years you've been in the business, right? So I'm
Yeah.
sure you've seen it all. Give me a sense of, if people are, maybe cutting a budget because they're really cost conscious, what do they have to worry about?
Well, at the end of the day, having a cremation should be the same no matter where you go. But it is the like, hey, I'm emailing, like, are you going to help me write an obituary? Are you going to put it on your website? Are you going to get me death certificates or just file it? So it's having clear expectations of what is going to happen so that you're not let down when it doesn't happen for you because it's not in what you paid for. So really having a full understanding of what the funeral home is doing for you so you don't get let down by it not happening is a good thing. I don't know if it's gone wrong, but timing, there's people who come in to make arrangements and they've already posted service days and times on their Facebook page
Oh,
and
geez.
we've not even met. Like we don't even have the deceased in our care. Like what are
Right.
you doing? Um, there's so many people who assume that, when we bring Bob into our care, that we take Bob right to the crematory because they say they wanted him cremated. And so they plan that the service can be in 2 days, but we won't even have the permits for a week sometimes. So people set themselves up for failure by having these assumptions from whatever that certain things are happening. And that is where things can go really wrong, is because we have to rein them back in or tell them no. And we don't want to be the no people. COVID made us the no people, and it was a terrible 2 years. especially when people come in and they've not even they don't realize that we kind of lead the process and we lead the timing and the schedule for everything. And they don't want to trust us because they've been told we're terrible, and they come in with a grudge and they're super grumpy and they're telling us, I mean, I've sat with people and they're like, well, you're just trying to steal from me. And I'm like, what am I trying to steal? Like, I don't want your money. Like, you
Right.
have to pay for whatever it is you want us to do for you, but I don't want your money. Like, that's not how it works.
So
Um,
what I'm hearing then is that if you can, right, especially if you know that a death is coming,
mhm.
it would be wise to take the time ahead of time to do
Do
your
that.
research, write down your questions, and again, and this is such a time of where we're like not mentally okay. So I guess, are people in general, based on your experience, are people willing to do that? Or I'm just thinking some people might be like I can't even think about the death, and because until it actually happens, because even
Yeah,
people who are on hospice, they still want to hold on to that hope that they're going to be okay, that they're going to get
right.
better. There's that moment, literally it's like the day or hours before people die, that people don't know about, where they actually get better, and I feel
Yep,
like they have like a burst of energy. I don't know, i
they
i
do.
i look at it as like a gift from God to like see who they were one more time, so that you can remember that before they pass on.
Yeah.
But do people do that, or is that most people don't?
It's six one half dozen the other. There's people who go and pre-fund and pre-plan their funerals when they're 40 or 50, for no reason. They just want to do it. A lot of people, when they retire, are told, hey, you should go fund your funeral as your part of your investing
Got it.
for your retirement for later. So we see people in that phase doing it. People, when they're on hospice, are told they need to pick a funeral home because that has to be part of the paperwork. So
Okay.
people will make some calls and kind of go visit places if they need to. The more so it's a conversation. People, well, never wanted to talk about it, so we just didn't. So now we got to figure it out. Or what always blows my mind is the people who have never even discussed, do you want to be buried or cremated? Like, do you want just the basics
Do
that
people come to you and ask that question, and have you help them make that decision?
the biggest is talking through like what do you envision for your service, like, or for your loved one's service? Like, what does that vision look like? And what parts are important to you? I sat with a family the other day and each one wanted a different thing, and each one didn't like what the other one wanted.
Mm,
They agreed on the cremation or burial. That was never a part of it, but it was all the events and how they were going to happen leading up to it. And so we came to it was a very long 2.5 hours of trying to figure it out, but we finally figured it out. It's just having the conversations and trying to work through it. And sometimes I can't be warm and fuzzy with those families, really. Like, I don't develop the same relationship because I have to be kind of not stern, but I have to be more direct with them,
right.
that you're a mediator at that
Well,
point.
that's what I was just going to say. You have to
It's
add mediator to your list
it,
to the skill set.
it is hard. Not knowing just the basics always blows my mind. I will never forget. I had a lady who was over 100, had died. Her son's 80 something. And he's like, I just don't even know what to do. I just didn't expect this. I'm like, she has been on borrowed time for 20 plus years. Come on, my friends. Like, one conversation should have happened about this at some point.
Mhm.
But there are so many people who avoid it because if you talk about it, it's going to make it happen. Or if we
That's a
talk
good one.
about the fact that I might die, then I'm probably going to. I'm not going to ever get better. Like you said with the hospice, or even not when you're even on hospice, just if you have, let's say you have cancer and you're going through treatments and you're going through, things can happen at any time. Chemo often creates health problems outside of the cancer that can, drain on your heart or cause all these other problems. So they can create a um, unexpected death because of the treatments. Have a conversation. Just have a conversation. It doesn't mean that you're prompting death to happen or that you're encouraging it. It's that you're planning for whatever might happen. Because if you're going to sit and plan for this beautiful life later, after you get through this journey, also plan for the other. Just have it on the shelf in case you need to pull it down. The one thing I will say is do not put on your family that they can't do anything for you.
Oh,
That's the most selfish, harmful thing that I see families are told by the person who has been failing is do not promise me you won't have anything. I don't want you to have a funeral for me. Well,
oh,
that's not really your choice.
right. And it's not about you. It's
It's not
about the
about
people
you
who
in
are
that
grieving
moment.
you.
These
Yeah.
people are here, they have to live, they have to go on, and they have to do it in a way that is going to be beneficial to them to take those next steps into this new life they have without you. And if for them it means being surrounded by loved ones that want to hug them, love on them, fill them with support,
Yeah.
don't be selfish and put on them that they can't have something for you because they're going to do that just because you're not here and they don't want to go against you.
This is
So,
such good messaging too, because
yeah,
so most of my audience, most of my viewers, right, have already been through a funeral and cremation. Some of them, I need to sort of shout out to the people who didn't have time to prepare, right? And I think that
yeah,
we all know that sudden death happens. It is the number one video that I have on my channel is talking about sudden death because people are broadsided and they don't know what to do. And so, yeah, there's a lesson here that you need to get your own things in order, right? Because we all are going to die, right? And so if
we're
you've
all
buried
dying.
someone
Yeah.
else, you know that it's going to happen. And so, better to plan ahead of time. The advice that you're giving about, you know, if you're making your own decisions about what it is that you want, and then you're sharing that with family, especially like I'm the youngest of seven, right? So to try to
Yeah.
get us to agree on anything is like it's practically impossible. So having that sort of lined out and talked out ahead of time and written somewhere, even better, I think is super helpful and is really a
Yeah.
gift that you can give to the people who are now going to be grieving you.
Yeah. And writing up your will and putting it in your will, do not do that. That is not the place to do it. Legally, it's not anything binding that anybody has to do when it comes to your funeral or anything. If you put it in your will, it means nothing in Michigan.
Okay.
That means nothing. If I say I want to be cremated and blah blah blah. Well, if your family doesn't want to cremate you, they're not going to. You don't get a say in your disposition in Michigan. You can tell your family, and if they agree, great, but you don't get to choose for yourself. And if you put it in your will, well, where is the will? Is it a legally binding will even? I think people will go at home and go, will and testament of Carrie Northey, and they'll write out their stuff and they'll stick it in a cupboard and they think that that's a legally binding agreement. That is nothing. It's just
Mm,
paper that you've written down some things for your family. That's not a legal will. A legal will has to be filed. It has to be, there's a lot of specifics to it. Your family, let's say if I put in there I wanted to be cremated and my kids don't want me cremated and they're the ones in charge, another person who is close to me could say, I'm going to put a court order on this. I'm going to show them your will and then I'm going to try and get it done. But usually by that point, it's too late and it's all done. So don't put important things you want your family to know specifically in your will. That's more for like, hey, I want so and so to have something or whatever. Because a reading of a will doesn't happen for weeks after a death.
right.
And
Okay.
by
No,
that point, you're dead and gone, and it's all history at that point. It's not like in a movie where you died today, 3 hours later, they read your will with your family staying around. Like it doesn't happen that way. So important things, you should find your funeral home you want to use, get a pre-funded or pre-arranged funeral done, and have a file at the funeral home with things and then give copies to your family or who's going to be in charge. And know who is legally in charge because that is a huge misconception as well. Your partner of 18 years, not legally in charge. So if you're not legally bound to someone, they're not your person unless you
Mm.
have the correct paperwork. And most people don't realize what the correct paperwork is. So,
That's
look
super
in,
good advice.
look
Super good
into things
advice.
ahead.
So I spent 20 years of my life in California before
Mhm.
coming back to the East Coast to Virginia Beach. Um, have you noticed, like, is the incidence of cremation versus burial, has it been, California's very environmental. That's where I was going with that. Um, has the incidence of cremation is it more common now than it was in the past?
Oh yeah, it's always increasing, slow but sure. More so out of cost efficiency because the death care industry really shot ourselves in the foot by driving down the price of cremation and making it the most affordable selection. But then we complain as an industry that people are selecting it more. It's
Right.
like duh, guys, they're gonna pick it more because it's more
Exactly.
affordable.
I had one client that I was working with, so she had lost her mother and she was struggling with the grief of her mother. She was taking care of her dad, and then her dad ended up passing away. He was elderly as well. Started telling me about how she was going to go and witness the cremation.
Yeah,
And I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And can you talk about that? Because, like, what
yeah.
does that even mean?
Yeah, you're not actually seeing the body be cremated. You are witnessing the onset. So you are there and you can watch the body when it goes into the cremator and then the door closes. And then you can choose if you want to push the button or not to start it. So, and there's every once in a great while, someone may sit there during the whole process, but not typically. That's typically more religious. Um,
Mm.
that someone may like a Hindu, someone who's Hindu or Sikh may want to stay for that, but not typical. They may charge you an additional fee for that. And the reason they do that is because there's a specific order in the day when specific types of individuals or boxes that they're in, either they're heavy caskets or cardboard, need to be cremated. And
Mm.
so if they have to change the schedule of that for a witness, then it kind of disrupts the whole order of the day. So they charge a little more because they may not be able to cremate as many people that day because of such.
I was just thinking about that. So you guys like drop a comment if that's something that you guys would do. I don't know how I feel about that. Like at first when
Yeah.
she said that, I was like, "Oh, good Lord, why would anyone want to be there?" Like the thought of what's happening,
Yeah.
like kind of freaked me out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so, but then I'm like, well, people said, well, they used to, back before all of this was a variable, they would put them on on wood out in the ocean and set them on fire and sort of let them go. So I'm like,
No, that whole Viking thing is not true.
it's
So,
not true. Okay, good. Thank you for correcting. Go ahead.
but I mean, they still have open air cremations, which they don't call them that, they call them burnings in India down on the river, and
Okay.
that's how they burn bodies on open air, funeral
But it's
pyre.
tradition and
It's
it's more
tradition.
common
That's what
because
they
it's
always,
tradition.
yep, you walk along by the shops and then all of a sudden there's bodies burning. And that's religiously what they need to do to go, um, to their higher play. I love it. I love the embrace of death care with so many other cultures because we have become a don't see, don't care, just dispose of them and then put them on a shelf somewhere. And when we deal with these, like other religions and other cultures, they're so hands-on and they're washing and they're handling and they're holding and they stop their lives to do this. And so many people outside of those are like, well, I don't know. I can't even bother to even meet with you today. I need to do this or I need to do that, or I've got a vacation plan, so we'll just deal with it later. And it's
Mm.
like this whole person that birthed you or was your partner for forever or whatever the case has died. Like you don't get to go around or bypass the fact that they have died.
Mm.
It doesn't make it easier if you avoid it. Like it's there, it's going to be waiting there for you down the road there whenever you want to come back around. But
Yep.
we have such an avoidance and we don't honor their life by doing that. And that drives
Mhm.
me nuts. So I love working with all the religions who are so hands-on and the cultures who are so hands-on because I think it's beautiful and it's honoring and it's what we all should be doing. And it's just not. It's sad.
So what's one thing that people don't know that they probably should know or is interesting to know, um,
Well, let me
or
ask
that you would want them to know?
Let's look at a comment you just said. You said something about cremation in California and environmentally friendly. What were your put that in a nugget as to why you put that all together?
So I'm thinking casket requires this much space.
Hmm.
Cremation may not require any space. I think about like, would we run out of space? Right? Like if everybody were to be buried, like there seems to be only a certain amount of land.
I just loved, I wanted to circle back because you said that. Burial and cremation use the same environmental footprint.
Oh, tell me more.
You're using gas, you have emissions,
Okay.
you're using wood that you're burning up, you're all of it. So you're using the same environmental footprint almost to the T. Cremation is a little bit lower than burial,
Okay.
but yeah, there's so many misconceptions. Like formaldehyde is naturally, created. It neutralizes when it is out into the environment. So when it's down in the earth, it's neutralizing. So it's
Okay.
not toxic going out
Good
into
to know.
the
Okay.
earth
Yeah.
like everyone thinks. You can't become a tree from cremated remains. There's nothing nourishing about cremated remains. They actually will kill vegetation. So if you took a box of cremated remains and dumped them on that plant will die.
Right.
So this whole I want to be a tree thing lately that has become the new phrase is not going to happen. You actually have to neutralize out the cremated remains to try and make them not be killing a tree.
Mm.
There's so many misconceptions and it's like educating one person at a time. You're never going to educate the masses. There's people who don't want to believe anything you say, even though
Yeah.
it's fact. It's like, well, you can go ahead and believe that, but I'm just telling you, it doesn't exist, it doesn't work, whatever. But people just want to believe what they want to believe. There's always somebody who'll come up and say, well, I had an uncle and his buddy had a friend whose cousin saw a body sit up. And I'm like, well, I'm going to tell you, they don't sit up. It's physically impossible. Nope, nope, nope. He saw it. I'm telling you, he saw it. I read someone's description of this recently and it was so perfect. And they're like, okay, lay on the ground flat and then sit straight up. How many muscles are engaging in your abdomen and
Exactly.
body to do that? Because all of that has to engage for that physically to happen. So a body doesn't just sit up on its own. Like every one of those muscles would have to engage at the same time to do it. And
Right.
it does not happen. It doesn't happen. But there's people you just can't convince of that. And they want to believe the wives' tales and the beautiful romanticized version of, spreading cremated remains where they all blow off no, it's bone. It's all bone. There is no ash. It is not ashes. It is ground down bone. And when you open and dump, it's gonna fall because
Right.
it's heavy. It's like 10-pound box.
Hmm.
So it's bursting a lot of bubbles, and I don't tell things to burst the bubbles,
Right.
but it is I like people to be prepared for what they're going to encounter. Like when you go to spread these cremated remains, you're probably doing it illegally, just telling you that up front,
Right.
but it's not going to look like you think it might look, and here's what's going to happen, and just trying to educate so people don't encounter a moment that is surprising to them. But you can only do so much, and you have to have
Right.
ears that are open and willing to listen. People are like, "Well, I want to be cremated for it's better for the environment." Do you realize what is being used and done in order for cremation to happen? Like you're using a lot of resource for it, a lot of gases, you're putting out things into the air, which is all clean. It's nothing, it's all fine, but you're still using
Right.
resources in order to do it.
Thank you for educating me on that
You're
because, yeah, I
welcome.
didn't know. And clearly, like, I need to spend more time watching your YouTube channel. So I love that you've been putting, the little 2-minute clips, right? Which, because we're all so busy and it's like, oh, I need to know what that is. And I'll see on there a lot of times, like, words that I don't know. And I'm like, oh, I should probably know what that word is. So thank you for that. Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm Kari the Mortician, Kari, on all social medias. Not huge in the TikTok, but I am there a little bit, but mostly Facebook and Instagram. I try and post daily, if not about 5 times a week. And then my videos, I'm trying to find time to film more for the YouTube because I'm just busy at work. I'm so tired. I look tired. I feel
You
tired.
don't
It's
look tired. You look great.
Oh, it's been this week has been crazy. It's only Wednesday. We're recording this on Wednesday and I am beyond exhausted already. It's been a week.
Yes.
So, yeah, check everything out there. If you have questions, just send them over. You can email me, Kari at carrythemortician.com. I respond to all emails. Um, and I will answer anything.
Excellent.
I'm pretty much
Excellent.
I
Well,
don't
thank
think,
you.
yeah, there's no
Thank,
question I haven't answered yet. So,
and I love that so much. I love your transparency and I love that you want to educate people. So, like, let's keep doing that. I will
yeah,
share this obviously with all of my viewers as well.
thank you.
And yeah, and thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Bye, guys.